Y'all, this is Mindy Strong. I am talking to you today about fixed income basics. This is to help you prepare for the Series 65 exam. This should be used as a supplement only. I recommend you find a great online testing platform that will give you some quizzes and teach you all of the information for Series 65. This is just to help you understand the concepts a little bit better. We are in the first section, and within the fixed income basics subsection of that, I hope this helps you, as I created these to help myself when I was preparing to take the test. All right, without further ado, let's go. So first of all, we are going to talk about the basic bond. It is a type of debt security. It pays interest and then it repays a principal. Bonds have a stated rate of interest. They have a stated par value, and they have a stated schedule of payments. Series 65 uses a lot of different words to mean the same thing, and there is a lot of vocabulary that once you understand the meaning of the word, you can understand the concepts, and then you can understand the questions, and then you will do well. The Series 65 exam, in my opinion, is not one in which you should try to memorize the information. Memorizing the formulas is great, but memorizing the concepts will not be as helpful as actually learning these concepts. And most of these concepts are pretty duh and involve a lot of common sense. It's learning the vocabulary that often stands in the way. So, yield is how much you get. The market rate of interest. So that means that rate of interest means how much are you going to get for said investment. So rate of interest, market rate of interest, yield, all the same thing, and it means how much am I going to get? So if we think of a bond as something that has a designated state of, or a stated rate of interest, like let's say 5%, okay? And this bond is issued at 5% interest rate. And when you first buy it, it's cost you $1, okay? And so that bond exists with a 5% interest rate. But then the interest rates go up. So then bonds for 6% or 7% interest rates can be issued. Well, if you are the issuer of that 5%, and there is a rival that has a 6% bond and they're charging $1 for it, you certainly aren't going to be able to charge $1 for that 5% interest rate bond, right? Because it's going to only yield 5%. So what you would do in that case is you would have to lower the price of the bond. So if interest rates rise, the price of the bond must be brought down. That is also called being sold at a discount. So if interest rates go up, then we know that the price of the bond has to go down and it will be sold at a discount. We know the word discount. You think something is sold at a discount, it's sold for less money. If interest rates if interest rates fall, the opposite has to happen. So the interest rates fall. So now you have a bond. The price of those new bonds that you create, let's say somebody has a 5% bond and they're charging $1, and now the interest rates fall. So you can only have a 4% interest rate. Guess what? You're going to have to sell it at a premium. So as the interest rates fall, the price of the bond must be brought up. Got it. Inverse relationship. Now we look at the longevity, or the length of time in which you have this bond. If it's a long maturing bond, what does that mean? That means that you agree to the terms of the bond and they say you're going to make a certain percentage of interest every year. Okay, it's 5%. And at the end of 30 years, you're going to get your money back. So for 30 years, you're going to get that 5%, 5%, 5%. That's a long maturity bond. The longer the maturity, the more the change in interest rates is going to affect the compounding of that interest and thus the volatility. Okay? So the longer the maturity, the more change in interest. affects the compounding effect. And that was me yawning. Short-term maturity bond. The shorter the maturity, the less the change in interest rates affect the compounding effect and thus the volatility. And you can see there, I have some visuals for you. So shorter period of time, less change, not much volatility. Got it. Low coupon rate. Low coupon rate, here's another term for you. The coupon rate is the interest rate. So if you have a lower interest rate, then the more the change in interest rates is going to affect the value of the bond, because most of the value of the bond is in the final payment, right? If you're getting a 1% interest rate on a bond, you're only getting 1%. Most of the value in the bond is on the final payment. So there's going to be more volatility. If you have a higher coupon rate bond, then the value of the bond, more of it is in the interest payments. So the less interest rate changes are going to affect the value. The volatility is less. If you are having trouble with these concepts, slow down. Read over this again. Pause this video. Look at these images. Higher coupon rate means the more of the value of the bond is in the interest payments. If you have a 10% coupon rate, more of the value of the bond is in the interest payments. So interest rate changes aren't going to affect the value as much. The volatility is going to be a lot less. Okay. The most volatile bonds are the LLs, the long and lows. Long-term zero coupon bonds are the most volatile of all. Long-term, low coupon rate, most volatile, most susceptible when interest rates change. Duration is yet another term you need to know. It is also called the measure of bond price volatility. It is a measure of the time it takes for the bond to be repaid by its internal cash flows. So, it makes sense that the longer maturity and lower the coupon, the greater the duration. This is definitely something you want to make an index card on, and you want to learn how to calculate the current yield. So again, yield is the interest rate. Current interest rate is what we're looking at. Remember, if we have a bond being sold at a discount or a premium, that's going to affect it. That's going to affect the bond's market price, right? If a bond is being sold at a discount, then the bond's market price is going to be lower. It's going to go down. If the bond is being sold at a premium, the bond's market price is going to be higher. It's going to go up. So in order to determine what the current yield is, you take the annual interest in dollars and you divide that by the current bond market price. So let's think about this logically. If a bond is being sold at a discount, so we'll use 100 as the stated or par value, okay? 100. But it's being sold at a discount, so it's being sold for 90. That means in this case, our denominator would go from 100 to 90. Our denominator would be smaller once the discount rate is applied. The bond's new market price is 90. What is that going to do to this current yield when the denominator is smaller? The current yield's going to go up. It's going to have a higher yield, right? Now, in the example of a premium rate, now the bond is being sold for $110. That denominator is larger. That's going to give us a lower current yield. Okay? Makes logical sense. There is the yield to maturity, also known as the internal rate of return. So in this case, what we want to look at is if this bond is held to maturity, How much is going to be made from this bond? So we take the annual income, and if we have a discount bond, then we add in that gain that you will get over time. If we have a premium bond, you will subtract the loss you will experience over time. Divide that by the average of the purchase price and the redemption price. Divide it by 2. So that's the average. Purchase price, redemption price divided by 2 is the average. Now, again, let's think logically about this, the yield to maturity. So if we have a discount bond, we know that we're going to add in the gain in the numerator. The numerator is going to be larger in that case than if we subtract the loss as we would in the premium bond. So if we have a discounted bond, we're going to take that annual income and then we're going to add to it. We're going to add the gain, which means the numerator is going to be larger, which means our yield to maturity is going to be higher. We know that the yield to maturity in a discounted bond is going to be higher. Okay, makes sense, logical. There's the rule of 72. The rule of 72 is a measure of how many years it takes to double an investment. It's calculated by using the interest rate and dividing by 72. Why am I yawning? I'm boring myself. Okay, sometimes the question will be, what is the interest rate? And then they will give you the number of years to double, and you will figure it out that way. And often they will give you the interest rate and ask you how many years it will take to double the investment. Simply use this formula to figure that out. This is certainly a formula I would put on an index card and memorize. Yield to call. Okay, now, the issuer of a bond has the right to call the bond back at a predetermined price. So basically the issuer can say, wait, I don't want to pay you these interest payments anymore. I'm going to redeem this bond and give you the price that I put in the contract. So I'm going to stop making these interest payments to you, and I'm going to pay back the price that we agreed to in the contract. Now, why in the world would an issuer do this? Let's use logic again. Why would they want to stop making these interest payments? Well, if interest rates drop and they have this 5% bond they're making interest payments on, and interest rates drop to 4%, then they, if it's in the contract, can call the bond back and say, we're not going to make 5% interest payments anymore. We're going to reissue new bonds with 4% interest payments. We'll only have to pay 4%. But this would all be written out in the contract. So the issuer is going to pay the call premium and then issue new bonds at the lower interest rate. Makes sense, right? Okay. And again, when are the bonds called? When the interest rates fall. Yield to call, date, or the put option. So, a yield to call, date, or put option, here's what happens. You take the annual income, you add in the gain if it's a discount bond, you subtract the loss if it's a premium bond, and that's divided by the average of the purchase price and the call or the put price, also known as the purchase price plus the call or put price divided by 2. And once again, it is logical to see that the discount rate would give a higher yield than the premium rate. Okay. A discount bond will not be called early because it's paying a lower than market rate of interest. A discount bond will not be called early. When someone buys a discount bond, they do not expect it will ever be called early. However, a premium bond will be called early if it's paying a higher than market rate of interest and it's designated in the contract. So she, issuer of the bond, can resell at a lower interest rate. Makes sense. Logical. No one ever wants the premium bond they own to be called early. Okay. This is a really helpful image that I want you to use to help yourself understand the concepts. If I were you, I'd pause the video and talk through it right now with yourself. If interest rates go up, what's going to happen to the yield to call, the yield to maturity, the nominal, and the market rate? How is it going to affect the bonds, the price of bonds? Okay, have fun with that. Interest rates go up. We know that bond prices go down. We know that in discount bonds, the yield to call is going to be the greatest. We know that in premium bonds, there is a chance that the yield to call may happen, right? Never in a discount bond would we expect that to happen. But in a premium bond, we would. Okay. Risks. We have a credit risk, and that is the question of can they make the interest payments and the principal. So that's when we look at junk bonds and bonds that don't have high ratings. You really want to make sure that you're looking at that before you decide on a company. Credit risk. Interest rate risk. Interest rates increasing will cause the bond prices to fall. Interest rate risk. Marketability risk. Will you be able to sell this security? How common is this security? How often is it sold in the marketplace? Purchase power risk. If interest rates are increasing, it will cause bond prices to fall, right? So, long-term low coupon are the most susceptible to purchase power risk. What would be the most susceptible? It's also the most volatile. Zero coupon bonds. Long-term zero coupon bonds would have the greatest purchase power risk because long-term, you're holding on to them a long time, and zero coupon, you're not making any interest rate, anything back in interest rate payments. Another risk is legislative risk. New laws can affect the security. If we're looking at, like, let's say cannabis products, THC, anything that involves the environment, drug companies, pharmaceuticals, things like that. Obviously, legislative risk could be a concern. Call risk. We've already gone over this. Will the interest rates drop and the bond be called early? In that case, you've got some definite call risk there. Opportunity cost. When you choose to invest in one fixed income security, then you're not investing in another, right? You could potentially be making a bad choice. So there's an opportunity cost if you make the wrong investment. And then the reinvestment risk. And I love the image for this one. Will the interest rates drop and the bond be called early? Thus, the investor would have to buy another bond at a lower interest rate and lose future earnings in those interest payments, right? Makes sense. If you have a 5% earning bond and it's called early, and the best bond out there at the time then is 3%, obviously you'd be losing those future 5% payments. Boo! Reinvestment risk. Now we're going to talk about the yield curve. Okay. So, the yield curve usually looks like this. This is a healthy yield curve that we expect to see As maturities lengthen, the yields increase. So the longer we allow a company to hold on to our money, the more we expect to get in return, right? Duh. Common sense. Credit loosens during these periods of time. There's economic expansion. And we see that risks increase as bond time lengthens, and therefore a premium is demanded. And I just said that in another way. You can hold on to my money longer, but I expect to make more as a result. Okay. This is the usual way of things. But sometimes economic expansion peaks. So as maturity time lengthens, the yields do increase, but what happens is the short-term investment interest rates and the long-term investment interest rates become closer to the same. So if we think of this as years of maturity, we'll say this is 5 years of maturity to maturity, right here. And if we say this is 10 years, you can see that these numbers are pretty close. The interest rates are getting closer together. Short-term interest rates are increased, and long-term interest rates are a little more volatile. Credit is tightening, and the economic expansion is peaking. So when we see a flattened curve, we know that's happening. Short-term interest rates are approaching long-term interest rates. That means years to maturity, there's not much difference in the interest rate you're going to get over time, okay? Flattened curve. And then we have an inverted curve. So in this case, inflation is feared, credit is tightened, and as you can see here, short-term interest rates are increased a lot. We don't need to hold on to your money a long time, but we're going to give you more of an interest rate payment back, okay? So this is happening when inflation is feared. And then we have a summary here. So if we have an ascending curve, that's during normal economic expansion. It's the first one we looked at. That's what we expect. The flattening curve, the economy's peaking. Short-term rates are catching up to long-term rates. And then we have the feared inverted curve. Short-term credit is tightened and the economy is overheating. Okay? Makes sense? Cool. So that is our fixed income basics. If this has been helpful, awesome. Let me know what has been helpful. If you have questions, please ask. If you like this, go back to my channel and find more videos. I am creating videos on all of the concepts that will be tested in the Series 65. All concepts, did you say? All concepts, I said.